Hello, readers, family, and friends. Of all the presents I could give you this holiday season, probably the most personal is a piece of my heart and soul. I pour myself into everything I write, and I hope that you enjoy this story set in the fictional town of Destiny, Hamlet. Just one more miracle gets to what defines friendship. It's about the best and the worst in everyone. I love small towns. I love the small town I live in, and I hope that you'll come to love them as much as I do. I apologize if I cry while I'm reading this. This just really hit a lot of emotions for me when I was writing it. I have been very blessed that my children have not been extremely ill, but I've seen friends and people I know go through terrible situations with their children, so I could put myself in the main character's shoes. Destiny Hamlet, where miracles happen. Population 10,002. Just One More Miracle by Lori Sword. Your daughter is in a coma. The neurosurgeon shook his head. She should have been awake by now. Odds aren't good. The words washed over Kathy, chilling her, numbing her. She picked up Kyla's tiny 6-year-old hand and held it to her cheek. Please wake up, Pumpkin. Not a flicker of reaction. Kyla's black lashes stood out in stark relief against her pale complexion. Open your eyes, Kyla, for Mommy. Kathy? Jolie Pearson stood in the doorway of the hospital room looking tanned and healthy from her honeymoon to Hawaii. She moved into the room and pulled a chair up next to Kathy's. Still no improvement? None. The transplant went okay, though. Her body accepted the new kidney, Jolie asked. They aren't sure. It will be a while before they know, and if she doesn't wake up soon, her words choked off. Or how are you doing, honey? That's a tough surgery on the donor, too. Jolie took Kathy's hand. How was she doing? Did it even matter? If her daughter died, she didn't really care what happened to her. I'm fine. But her little baby wasn't fine. The blip blip of the heart monitor beeped a steady rhythm, and Kathy focused on it to keep herself from screaming. A gentle knock on the doorframe caused her to jump in surprise. She turned her head to see which doctor was there to give her more bad news. Sheriff Mitch White stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands. Kathy, I'm sorry. This is the worst possible time, but I have no choice. She'd known Mitch since grammar school, and she'd never seen him look as worried as he did at the moment. I need to speak to you privately. She frowned and glanced down at Kyla. She didn't want to leave her daughter. Whatever it was could wait. Jolie smiled at her. I'll sit here with Kyla and come get you if there's any change at all. Okay, she said, not surprised at how shaky her voice sounded even to her own ears. We'll be in the cafeteria, Mitch told Jolie. Mitch, what is this about? I really don't want to leave Kyla. She glanced back at the room as he guided her down the hall. A vague sense of unease was a sharp pain between her shoulder blades. You need a break anyway, Kathy. I didn't want to do this today with Kyla so sick and it being Christmas Eve and all, but the hospital board insisted. She held her questions until Mitch bought them both coffee and they found a table away from the few other diners in the dining area. Is the hospital worried about money? I don't have insurance, but it is about money, but not insurance. Mitch sighed, picked up his coffee, winced as he took a drink of the too hot liquid and set it back down. There's no easy way to say this. There's $10,000 missing from the Children's Christmas Fund. What? Two women across the room stopped talking and looked over at them. Kathy lowered her voice. How is that possible, Mitch? I'm the only one with access to that money. Exactly. His steady brown gaze held hers for long minutes. You think they think? Oh, no, no. She sat back in her chair. They thought she'd embezzled $10,000. Kathy, it's understandable. If it was Mia who was ill, I'd do whatever I had to in order to get her an operation. I know it was expensive. No, I did not take this money. Mitch stood. This can wait until Kyla's out of the hospital. I shouldn't have let myself be pressured into bothering you with this now. You go be with your daughter. Kathy nodded but felt the additional weight of yet another worry nestled down with the others already there. It was almost more than she could bear, and she laid her head on the table, unsure what to do. Kyla was all she had in this world. Determined never to follow in her mother's footsteps, she'd nevertheless gotten married and pregnant just out of high school and had a child 9 months later. Kyla's father died in an accident shortly after her second birthday, leaving Kathy to raise the little girl alone just as her mother had done before her. She hadn't taken that money, but why should anyone in this town believe her? Her own father spent 10 years in prison for operating a car theft ring. Oh, Pumpkin, she glanced over to try to still form under the bleached white hospital sheets. I don't know how to get out of this mess. Where had the money disappeared to? What if they wouldn't believe her? Would she wind up like her father? If Kyla recovered, they'd put her child in foster care. All her years of sacrifice and hard work, putting herself through beauty school and building her business from the ground up, all a waste. She'd wind up just like her parents. Well, she wouldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. She was going to log into the system and find out where that money had gone. She sure hadn't taken it. There wasn't even enough money to buy Kyla a doll for Christmas, much less $10,000. The office that housed the items and computer for the Children's Christmas Fund sat on the basement level of the hospital just next to the morgue. With so many of the support staff off for Christmas Eve, the hallway was deserted. The sound of Kathy's shoes echoed off the sterile walls. She glanced over her shoulder, feeling as though she'd just landed in the midst of a B-horror movie. All she needed to do was access the computer files, take a quick look at the bank statement, and she'd find the mistake, because it had to all be a crazy mistake. Her key slipped into the lock easily, and she opened the door. Flipping on the light, she turned around and closed the door behind her. Not wasting any time, she turned on the computer and slid into her chair. She needed to get back to Kyla. What if she wakes up even for a moment and I'm not there? Her fingers flew over the keyboard, the sound of the keys clicking softly like gentle patter of rain on a tin roof. The account balance pulled up from the bank website, but the balance that appeared in bold letters wasn't right. Frowning, she clicked to pull up the more detailed statement. The creak of the doorknob alerted her to someone else's presence a millisecond before the door flew open. The hospital security guard stood in the open doorway. Bert, Kathy's hand flew to her chest. You scared the daylights out of me. It's so deserted down here in the morgue. She trailed off, feeling childish. Kathy, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Bert looked down at his shoes, refusing to meet her gaze. What? She hit the print button to send the statement to the laser printer. The pages began to whiz out of the paper tray. The board just gave me the order to come down and secure the office and wait for maintenance to change the lock. I think all the presents were the final straw. Everyone could understand why you might take the money to save your little girl's life, but taking money to buy a bunch of stuff is another thing. Bert's words slammed into her stomach with the same impact his fists would have had on her. What was he talking about? She had clipped a picture of a doll out for Kyla and planned to let her know that as soon as they caught up on all their bills, she'd buy her the prettiest doll she could find. But she didn't have the money to actually buy a doll right now. Bert, I swear to you, I'm just following orders, Kathy. Go back to your little girl. Kathy swallowed, scooped up the statement from the printer, and brushed past Bert. Her cheeks felt on fire, despite the fact that she'd come from the wrong side of the tracks in this small town. One of the reasons she'd stayed here was because she thought she had friends. She thought that the townspeople judged her upon her actions, and she'd certainly thought that during a time like this, when her little girl was so ill, they would give her the benefit of the doubt before accusing her of being a thief. The crispness of the papers felt cool against her hand. She folded them several times and slipped the statement into her back pocket. She'd have to look at them later. Right now, she needed to get back to Kyla. A huge, brightly wrapped and red ribbon package sat just inside the door to Kyla's hospital room. Kathy wondered if this was the present Bert had been speaking of. She took another step into the room and gasped. Every table, the wide windowsill, and the floor along the back wall of the room was filled with presents of every shape and size. She knelt down and read 3 tags, to Kyla from Santa. She shook her head. No, 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 no. As kind as the gesture was, the board was certain to think she'd done this. They would assume she'd bought these presents with the missing money. It was worse than a smoking gun. She moved to Kyla's bed. If her daughter would just wake up, she would face whatever else she had to face. Wake up, baby. Please wake up. Not even the slightest twitch ruffled the perfect stillness. Her child couldn't have been more motionless if she was dead. She swallowed down the bile that threatened to rise. Kathy, the sheriff stood in the doorway again, his hat in his hands. Mitch, why doesn't she wake up? She has to wake up. She picked up Kyla's hand and pressed a kiss to the knuckles. Kathy. His voice broke and her head snapped up. What was wrong now? What is it, Mitch? Just give it to me straight. I have to arrest you. The board's pressing charges. I tried to talk them into waiting. I'm sorry. No, she shook her head. She was not leaving Kyla. They couldn't make her. How could Mitch do this to her? I tried to fight it, but the presence, he spread his hands. She lowered her head, feeling as though the weight of 1,000 worlds pressed down on her. How much more, Lord? I can't take any more. Please, please, please. How much is the bell? She asked, as if she had any money to pay it anyway. We won't know until Monday morning. Monday? Was he actually planning to put her in jail and leave her there until after Christmas? That was almost 5 days. I am not staying away from my daughter for 5 days. I'll try to get Judge Pearson to hold a special. Forget it. You and I both know that the Pearsons hate me. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a bark. Can I at least phone Jolie and ask her to come back and sit with Kyla before we leave? Of course, Mitch said. When Jolie arrived, she screamed, How can they do this? Jolie, this is important. I need you to listen to me. Stay calm. If Kyla wakes up, be sure and tell her that I love her. I will, honey. We're going to fight this. But Kathy wasn't listening. Fight what? Her life was over. The doctors had said there was little hope that Kyla would recover. Deep in the pit of her stomach, she knew that she would miss the last precious moments of her child's life. She wouldn't be here when Kyla slipped from this world into the next. As she leaned over and kissed her daughter on the forehead, her soul screamed out in agony, and something inside of her broke, allowing her to go numb. That was good. Being numb was the only way that she would survive this. I love you, Kyla, with all my heart and soul. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Kathy, she interrupted Mitch's words of consolation. I don't want to hear it, Mitch. Let's just go. I'm sorry. She shrugged. Thanks a million, God. Thanks for taking my prayers and creating even more problems. I never did anything but pray, try to raise my child, and live my life right, and this is the thanks that I get. She was too exhausted to rally more fury than that against her creator. The ham dinner Mitch had left on the small table in the cell went untouched. Kathy curled up on her side on the tiny, uncomfortable cot and stared at the gray cinder block wall. She tried to send a mental message to Kyla. Fight, Kyla. Please fight. Get better. But there was no hope left inside her. The world she thought she'd known made little sense now. How could she have faith when things kept going so wrong? She didn't doubt that God was there. She'd never doubted his presence, but she was angry at him. It wasn't as if she was asking for something petty. She hadn't prayed for earrings or a new coat or even a doll for Kyla. All she wanted was for her child to live. I'm done, God. I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm just done. Kathy, she didn't answer Mitch. She didn't move. I thought you'd want to know that the judge agreed to a special hearing the day after Christmas. So what? Kyla would be dead by then. She didn't respond. She heard Mitch sigh and eventually move away. 10 minutes later, he was back. Okay, I can't take this. Come on. She sat up. Come on? I'm letting you escape. No mother should have to be away from her daughter on Christmas Eve, especially with her so ill. I'll drive you back to the hospital. Kathy flew out of the cell and threw her arms around Mitch's neck. Thank you, Mitch. If you weren't married to one of my best friends, I'd kiss you. You're still in a lot of trouble, Kathy. I know. It didn't matter at the moment. She had to get to Kyla. You're back. A worried frown seemed to have settled between Jolie's brows as she watched over Kyla. Kathy patted her friend on the back. Thank you for being such a good friend, Jolie. No change. I know. Kathy traded places with Jolie and held tightly onto Kyla's hand. She should be praying, but she couldn't. She closed her eyes and swallowed several times. She swallowed again. Please, God. But the anger, confusion, worry, and panic all struggling inside of her wouldn't allow her to pray. She remembered a verse that said that the Holy Spirit interceded when you did not have the words but could only groan. She sure hoped so. The echo of a huge fist pounding on the hospital room door didn't cause a reaction in Kyla, but Mitch looked panic-stricken. "Who is it?" Kathy asked. "Bert," the security guard's voice sounded gruff. Had the board already heard that Mitch had let her come back here? Her eyes met his for a moment. Kathy felt the room start to spin. Mitch let Bert in the tiny room, and three other people stepped in right on his heels. "What's going on?" Mitch asked. "Tell him, Betty." Bert pointed to the nurse just behind him. "I gave a present to Kyla and signed it Santa. I felt so bad for Kathy and her little girl. She's in there day in and day out, loving her daughter and caring for her. And I knew they didn't have money for presents this year because of the cost of the treatments and surgery. I saw her put a picture in an envelope of a baby doll. I just wanted to help. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Thanks, Betty. But that only accounts for one package." "I sent one too after I talked to Betty." Katie, Mitch's wife, stepped forward. "Me too." Jolie's Aunt Daphne waltzed into the room in a billowy red hat and purple dress. "And then I called all the women in the Red Hat Society, and they sent presents." One by one, the townspeople shuffled into Kyla's room, each telling why they'd been inspired to send a gift to the little girl who fought for her life tonight. Tears filled Jolie's eyes. She was touched, but she still couldn't bring herself to talk to God. The room was filled to the brim. She was certain they were breaking all types of protocol. The noise level was a low rumble, and still her daughter didn't respond. "Thank you all," she whispered, but her eyes never left Kyla's face. "Do you mind if I say a prayer?" Aunt Daphne took off her red hat and stepped forward. Kathy looked up at the older woman. Did she mind? Why did the other woman want to waste her time? It was what it was. God wouldn't change it. "If you want," she said. She didn't want to be disrespectful, but inside she knew it was pointless. Aunt Daphne bowed her head, her lips moving silently. Everyone else in the room followed suit. Kathy turned back to her daughter, ignoring them. She'd had hope, too. How many days and hours had she spent in prayer? Kyla's eyelashes fluttered. Kathy leaned closer. No, there was no movement. They hadn't really fluttered. She'd just imagined it. Had she wanted it so badly that she'd invented the movement in her brain? She closed her eyes and joined the others in prayer, even against her own will. "Please, God, make my little girl better, please." It was all the prayer she could manage, but it was something. She opened her eyes and stared straight into Kyla's bright blue gaze. "Mommy?" Kyla's voice was weak from non-use. "Kyla? Was it true? Was her baby really awake?" Aunt Daphne laid her hand on Kathy's shoulder. "It's a Christmas miracle. Sometimes just when we give up hope is when God shows up. He does things in his own time for reasons we don't always understand." Kathy glanced at the round institutional clock above the doorway. Midnight. She started to laugh. "Oh, sweetie, you're awake." "I just needed a nap, Mommy," Kyla smiled. "Thank you, God, thank you." A rustle at the doorway drew her gaze as Dr. Nicholas Pearson tried to catch her attention. "Kathy, we found this folded printout in the hallway." He waved some papers at her, and she realized they were the bank statements she'd printed. She had stuffed them deep in her back pocket. How had they fallen out? Since she hadn't had a chance to look them over, she wasn't sure what to say. "We owe you an apology. The bank obviously made a mistake. All the money is accounted for. The balance is just incorrect." A loud whoop erupted from Mitch. His wife Katie threw her hand over his mouth, and everyone laughed. "Mommy, who are all the presents for?" Kyla's eyes glittered in anticipation. "They're for you, sweetheart, from Santa." Jolie leaned over and kissed Kyla on the cheek. "When you feel better, you can open them all." "I feel better," Kyla insisted. They all laughed. "Mommy, tell me the story about God's gift to us." It was Kyla's favorite story, the birth of Jesus. "Once, a long time ago, a baby was born, but this wasn't just any baby." She told the familiar tale to her daughter as the townspeople tiptoed out of the room. "I love that story, Mommy." "There's more," Kathy said. "There is?" "You see, Kyla, you were very sick, and God gave us just one more miracle on Christmas. He made you better. And he gave me back my faith." Kathy glanced toward heaven and smiled. I'm sorry I doubted you, God, and I'm sorry I was so angry. I hope you'll forgive me. You mean everything to me. I was just hurting so bad, and I didn't know what to do with all that hurt. It felt like you weren't hearing me, that you weren't there for me, but I know you were and you always are. I love you, and I'll pass that love I have for you on to Kyla. Merry Christmas.